Aladoye, Ayaba, Shango, Wariloye. I see my spirit traveling through space and time. When a voice come and may say, seek and ye shall find beauty all around me, pretty water for miles and miles. Then the voice informed me, this is the river Nile, and this land is secret, seen by very few. Your forbearance knowledge, now I pass on to you. I am the Orisha, so sacred to the Yoruba. Use these words to call me where you are, where the Neofa. Just say, Aladoye, 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 Ayaba, Shango, Wariloye, Aladoye, 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 Ayaba, Shango, Wariloye. Now my spirit floating, drifting like a cloud. Hearing voices calling, I look down and see a crowd drumming and they chanting in a different town. Music so enchanting, I had to go down, watching what they doing, trying to understand. It was so amazing since I came from another land. The high priest approach, hold and shake my hand. Welcome home, my son. Welcome to Shango land. Shango is my culture. May God hold
Adnan?
I'm going to speak to Val Serrant, please.
Yeah, speaking.
This is Jake Feinberg. How are you, brother?
Wonderful, wonderful. Everything okay?
Yeah, you ready to go?
I'm here.
Okay, here we go.
I had to go down, watching what they doing, trying to understand. It was so amazing since I came from another land. The high priest approach, hold and shake my hand. Welcome home, my son. Welcome to Shango land. Shango is my culture. Yoruba my tongue. Me God Olodumare, Orisha, Oshun and Ogun. Me calabash, me obi, me candle and me oil. This is what they hand me and say, son, go home now and toil. You may laugh and shun me and treat me with scorn, but I know who can help me since I was reborn. So when you hear a chanting and knocking me drum, all who stay there mocking, just wait till my power come. Hey, Aladoye, Aladoye, oh. Aladoye, Ayaba, Shango, Wariloye, Shango, Baba wa Shango, Baba wa Shango, Baba wa Shango.
Folks, welcome back inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is hour number 2 of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for being part of the program today, and it's such an honor to connect with a gifted percussionist, steel pans and djembes and all sorts of different percussive instruments from his homeland of Trinidad, Val Serrant. It's an honor. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, yes, for you.
How are,
Yeah, yeah. I'm here. Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, so
hey,
indeed, that was a nice surprise.
Val, can you talk? You came on my radar because I did an interview with Bill Summers, and you chimed in the post, and I wanted to know about when you first connected with Bill, and then if you could talk about your first time you connected with Bill Summers.
Yeah, well, actually, I've been in the Bay Area here since 1975, as I told you. So it's not that we personally close or so, but I was responding to what was in that article. So that's what happened there, And he's, as you know, one of the preeminent people in with this cultural tradition. So that's it. you know.
Can you talk about the? I had an opportunity coming to the Bay Area in '75. Can you talk about the early bands that you were a part of that were able to continue the rich cultural music of Trinidad and the kind of places that you had a chance to play in the Bay Area?
Yeah, it's too much. Yeah, but I have to shout out first to Danny Glover and Shaki Bomani and family, Mandisa Glover, because they are the ones that I first stayed with here. Danny was sent to me in 1974. He came to Trinidad, and in 75 is when I came up here. So I lived with them. So again, as you would imagine, you know, a lot of people I was in contact with. I was actually with Wajumbe Cultural Institution.
Wow.
What the Western Addition Cultural Center, now the African and African American Cultural Center there on Fulton Street. And of course, Avacha, who is, you know, a real icon here on the whole radio scene with KPO. I met her at KPO in 1975, was on her program. And, you know, she's a phenomenal musician, poetess, writer, everything. So in that way, too, you know, I connected with a lot of people. Wajumbe actually had a lot of artists, you know, so we did what we call the celebration of the Black dance and music experience. So with Tommy Sion, also from my country, who was here before me, he was with Julia Edwards, who recently joined our ancestors, and they were on the Ed Sullivan show and toured all over the place. And he did the limbo, so it was a perfect fit. And then we had later Jackie Hartman, formerly Celestine. You may know David Hartman, David McBurney, who has been on KPFA for many years. His mother and aunt, Beryl and Frida McBurney, were two of the top people in our cultural traditions in Trinidad and Tobago. Beryl McBurney actually founded the Little Carib Theater, where people like Paul Robeson came through, and where we had a lot of different people from my country performing, and so I played there also with many different artists. So there's a whole connection, you know, that's been there. So also, with the help was a founding member of Caribbean All Stars later on. So in that way, we combine a lot of the music from Africa through Janko, who is now also an ancestor from the Cameroon. And we incorporated a lot of reggae and kaiso, which some people call calypso. I like to say that kaiso comes from the Yoruba tradition, which evolved from that same Orisha tradition in my country, and a lot of the so-called rhythms that are played in the kaisos and with the steel band evolved from that tradition. So in that way, we were able to share a lot of, you know, the quote-unquote Caribbean cultural traditions too, and kept it going.
Hey,
and then I've worked with many other groups, you know.
No, I want you to. This is so important because you are a local legend in Oakland. In the community. What are from Trinidad, the rhythms, the cultural traditions of the spirituality of the drum? Could you identify a couple of things that you believe are most at risk of being lost? The roots at one time when you came here were still very strong, and there were many people that were coming over. I mean, you know, you had from the Indian side, you had Ali Akbar Khan, Alu Raka. You had Baba Tunde, and I'm talking about the luminary guys, but you had a huge amount of authentic people, indigenous people from their own countries coming and putting those roots firmly in the ground. And I feel now, just in my own way, that these roots are softening. I was hoping you could talk about a couple of things that are totally traditional to Trinidad that you believe are at risk here in 2017.
Yeah, well, again, when they talk about Trinidad and Tobago, it's really what do you say? I would say the main component is, African, so, traditions from Africa. So it's not like it's so unique to Trinidad and Tobago. As I say, even the Kaiso, even etymologically, Kaiso comes from Ko-Ayeso in the Yoruba, which means to bring mankind or bring the world together. So it's deeply rooted. As I say, I was raised with the Yoruba tradition in my country, with the Arada tradition, or Arada, like from Benin. But we also had the heavy East Indian influence, which was also influenced by African people. Many people like to isolate things, but it's all connected. Because if people were to Google the Jarawa, Jarawa, in the Andaman Islands in India, they would see what I'm talking about. It's African to the core, although they're undergoing a lot of pressure now. So you had like people who referred to as the Dalit and so on. Zakir Hussain can let you know about some of the influences of the quote-unquote darker-skinned people there in India. But again, it's all so connected that people try to isolate them. Now, coming from Trinidad and Tobago or elsewhere into this country, for a lot of people may not have grown up like I grew up in my village of Tacarigua, where near my grandmother's house, a few houses down, we had that Arada tradition, where we had even the so-called water drums, using the calabash and so. And then a little further down, we had the Orisha, as we say, Palais, right? Orisha tradition.
Right.
Next door to that Orisha Palais was the Catholic Church. And obliquely opposite the Catholic Church was the mosque, Islamic mosque, Then just over the train line, as they say, was another Orisha Palais, one of the main ones in my country, from Iya Gerald or Mother Gerald. And then further down in that area called Dinsley, we had the Hindu tradition. Now, lower down in Tacarigua, where I grew up as a child, obliquely opposite where I grew up as a real child and from baby, there was a Hindu mandir, right? And so I grew up hearing all of the traditions that were retained from India and being present there. And Trinidad and Tobago, that's one thing, the enslavement and colonial aspects, because the East Indians were brought there in 1845, and after the Africans were out of the so-called plantations, then there was this divide and rule, influence being perpetrated in Trinidad and Tobago. So we really fought against that, for many years. And a lot of the cultural traditions have been melded. I don't know if you ever heard of Ras Shorty I, who was called Lord Shorty, who was given credit as being the creator of what we call soca, really the soul of calypso, not soul calypso as people say. It's in the soul of calypso, in which he put together, rhythmic aspects from India, because he grew up in the central part of Trinidad, where there was a heavy population of East Indians working the sugarcane plantation, and he incorporated the Hindu in the music, and he used rhythms from the dolak,
Yes.
and so on. Yes, so it combined with the African tradition. A thing that you can look up and your listeners can check out, for example, is Om Shanti, right? Om Shanti Om, that he sang,
Absolutely.
So Om Shanti Om, yes. And so he incorporated that as in a form that really changed some of the phrasings in the music. So as you're saying about the losing some of these things, even Trinidad and Tobago, as I say, through the racist tendencies and through all that enslavement nonsense, it was really heavy, because, again, like here, where by law, the African people were not allowed to learn to read and write, and so on initially. You had in Trinidad and Tobago a heavy influence like that, like in many other countries. And by law, you were not supposed to be playing drums. Even now, some of the so-called laws are still on the books. right? So all of that, it wasn't just like being lost or people giving up. There was a systematic move to destroy or keep the Africans away from their cultural traditions. The East Indians were, we might say, a little luckier, although they came, under indentureship. But they were promised that after 5 years they would return to their families in India. Of course, that didn't happen. And they would have been paid and they got land and all of that sort of thing. So this is where a lot of the other divisions, were festered. But again, many of our people held on to our tradition. In my village, for example, the police would have to run when they come there trying to stop the ceremony. And you would have the elders who would have their like things from the Orisha tradition or Ifa. They have in a what we call a copybook, that you would use in the elementary schools.
Absolutely.
And so
Yep.
on. And they treasure that, that it's like gold. So a lot of the things were kept, and it's not everybody that now more people in my country, for example, we have Ella Handel, who was actually born in Grenada, but she has been, one of the people in the forefront that has put out albums, as we say, livicated, not dedicated, to different Orisha, like for Ogun, Oshun, Yemoja, and so on. So in that way, many more young people are coming around and getting out of that brainwashing that had been set up against African tradition. Now, on that aspect here in this country too, as you can see now, and maybe some people don't see it, but a lot of the Yoruba influence, has been within this country, just like in Puerto Rico and Cuba and so on,
No,
so
this
that
is
it's here and really heavy,
No,
Mm-hmm.
Val, you are. This is so important. Explain the power of the traditions. Why is the brain? Why is there? This is again. I'm 39, and I'm trying to disseminate this information for younger people who don't even know they're brainwashed. But why your music is to bring human mankind together? Why has it always been, the white man wanting to brainwash that? Explain the power of the tradition and why they've always wanted to separate it.
Well, again, that certain so-called divide and rule, divide and conquer thing, it was more geared towards the materialism. Even the so-called Christopher Columbus that people want to put on a pedestal, I mean, the damage that they did, not only with African people were concerned, but the quote-unquote native or indigenous people, I mean, it is very phenomenal. And again, they just use the word cultural traditions, let's put it that way, right? But that would include linguistics and everything else. Again, by separating people from their traditions, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That's how they were able to control, support and control. And even now today, I was telling some people, there's this thing about chaos and control, right? Now they had a program, people took it as a so-called comedy with what they call Get Smart, right? Who don't know, they can look it up. And the opposing side on that show were chaos and control. Obviously, what they had was is the U.S. and Russia. Now we see the same nonsense is going on now, but it's live. It's like when people go and they invade countries and so on, you destroy everything, all the chaos. Then you look to take control. As they said here, for example, with Iraq, as what's his name, Colin Powell told Bush, once you will go there, then you'll own it. You know what I'm saying? But it's the same thing all the time, creating all this chaos in order to control, and systematically, whether it's through tweets and all of this nonsense, is the same old pattern. And again, the so-called power trip is behind it. But people who are really steeped in their cultural traditions, I mean, I was warned of this time by my grandmother, and they coming from my great-grandmother. Now that we transition into what is referred to as this golden age that is coming now, which started coming into effect from around 1991. But then the reason why I'm here is the physical aspect was because of Yogi Bhajan, who is Har Bhajan Singh, now an ancestor, who is the Mahan Tantric or master of White Tantric Yoga and Kundalini Yoga. He is the one who asked me to stay in this country and really did whatever legalities to keep me here. Because, again, it's that whole thing where you have to have people who have to keep certain traditions going on in order that this whole thing doesn't collapse, you know? So the same thing happened with our elders. As I told you, they would be holding on very, strongly to their traditions, and they would pass it on to those of us. I say like something like osmosis. My brother and I, we were there by the altar and so on, and a lot of things, even my grandmother had to tell me at one point how I remember that, because there were things during my childhood really as a baby. But this is how some things are passed on to some people, and then we share it with others. This is what you're doing here, on your program, by letting people know that there are people who really love and respect the traditions, that which really, to use it slightly, have been heavily maligned. But the whole thing behind it, as you say, has been this portrait, a lot of it through the material things like Columbus, all these people were looking for gold, and what
well,
I mean?
It's just, trying to, I guess maybe even, the idea that material, collection of material things will bring peace, and that will not bring peace.
Oh yeah, I hear you. No,
but this is very,
this is
very hard
yeah?
for, this is very hard for Western people to understand. I didn't catch the name. Can you talk about the cat that say his name again, the cat that brought you here from Trinidad?
Yogi Bhajan. People can look up online. Of course, there have been attempts to soil his name and all of that. But he was what you call the Mahan Tantric, or master of White Tantric Yoga, right?
What,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. What's his name? His name is Yogi what?
Bhajan, Bhajan, like the song, where since we're dealing with cultural tradition, Bhajan relates to song,
Wow.
Bhajan, right? But how Bhajan sing, and names are very, very crucial. A name is something you have to live up to. So when African people, for example, they were deprived of their name, you saw in that Roots, which was, kind of, we don't want to get into too much of that about the triviality to some degree. But when you see that the person who they were referring to as Kunta Kinte was being whipped to make sure that he calls himself Toby, right? And deny his name. That is what happened all in the Caribbean, where the people were forced to, you must have a so-called Christian name. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So this is how deep, this is how deep that brainwashing and condition is for people. Even now with the so-called English. Sometimes they would even whip children because you're not speaking so-called proper English. These are things that people, really need to know, because a lot of African people didn't just give up their tradition. It was literally whipped out of them,
This
and
is amazing.
lynched out, murdered. Yes, so people have to face up to these things. That's why it keeps going on and on and on, because they haven't dealt with, the things factually for the children. That's why there's a sister here called Dr. Joy DeGuru who went into what she called the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And I think to the slave thing, African people were not slaves, they were enslaved, it's a big difference, So the whole enslavement process, that's what happened. When you come and not only going through that whole maafa, as we say, catastrophe, and a lot of the Africans being even just dumped overboard in order for the enslavers to collect the insurance from that Lloyd's of London, that's what they would do. Instead of making that 3-month trip or whatever, they would throw the Africans overboard and collect the insurance. But still, when they survive that, and come through and still retain this tradition, that's to tell you, all of the materialism and all this that the people try, they can't get rid of that. And we know that our ancestors are ever living. You see, this is the other thing that people don't realize, So anyway, it's a lot to go into. But again, this is what has happened, and thankfully, a lot of things, people that came from Africa didn't come as so-called slaves or enslaved, and this is why we got that connection. And for example, with Cuba and Brazil, have always kept that connection with the continent, of Africa. So that is why a lot of the traditions are being held on. And now, like we had the World Orisha Conference here in San Francisco years ago. So we had what we call like the Babalawos, like even the Iya Shango. And this is how deep this tradition is. I was at that conference, and who we call the Iya Shango. Well, Iya means mother, right? So it's the mother of Shango from Nigeria. She walked past me and said, Shango, because in the tradition, Shango is my father. So this is interesting that you played that song at the beginning, which again we have to give credit to one guy who took the name. Funny, the Calypsonian, Locaisonian, take names of some of these people. Like his name is Lord Nelson in the Kaiser world. Like we heard about Kitchener, but I don't know if Kitchener, who's one of our foremost Caisonians, right, who is now an ancestor also, Lord Kitchener, he called himself, but I don't know if he really looked into the story about the English Lord Kitchener,
Not yet. No, not yet. No, I mean, can you? I mean, but before, listen, Val, we need to do part two. I want you to talk about if you could tell a story about Yogi Bhajan, the idea of how the shaman quality of him and his leadership, and how he was able to bring people who didn't look the same or who had different background, how he was able to actually do that and bring human beings together in peace.
Well, that Mahan, is a spiritual light. He which was passed on from Lim Po, who was the Mahan Tantric before him. So it's a lot of, power that is there that can't be explained. It's something you have to experience. Like when I was with him when you do the white tantric, what you have the male and female polarities, right? So one male on one side, the female on the other side. And so you form these lines, and it's like Yogi Bhajan. But to put it simply, people would have to really go deeper to find out. But anyway, he would be sitting there. The lines are all the lines are in front of him. And he would spread his aura in order to help cleanse the aura of the people, who are there. So it's a very deep thing. I'll give you one example. I was sitting next to him. Usually sometimes I would sit next to him, to play. And when that happened, although, as I say, I maybe shouldn't have done it, but I adopted the posture, because there are different postures too that you adopt,
Sure,
there are different moods. Yeah, different mudras that you do with, with the fingers, hands and so on. But anyway, the posture of that day, I adopted it because I, as a youth, would go to the river in my country early in the morning, and that is the same posture I would adopt, And Yogi Bhajan said that day before he started, he said, we are going to do a meditation that was practiced by the ancient Egyptians over 2,000 years ago. So this is what I'm saying about the connection that is there with everybody. So when you're talking about him and a variety of people who come together, as I say, when the student appears, is ready, the teacher appears. So maybe not everybody that may come to Yogi Bhajan as students, but the right people, would come. You have the so-called other troublemakers who would come. That's always, something there. But you have to know. Like, for example, one day, we were there, and I had told one person the night before, she was married to a Trinidadian. She was there in New Mexico, is where we had the whole ashram.
Yes.
And I told her that I really, was picking up a lot of negative energy, there from people. Oh, well, blah, blah, blah. The next morning, bright and early, Yogi Bhajan said, we know some of you here. Well, he didn't really use the word evil, but he said that we are here to help, but we also know how to get rid of chaff, So this is what I'm saying. The people who would be attracted sometimes may have quote-unquote negative energy, just using words. But again, we have to know that we have to help people. But then you don't want to be drained. We call those people supnias, bloodsuckers, So this is why you would find some of them try to attach themselves and suck others. But Yogi Bhajan, to me, he sacrificed himself, to help lift a lot of people out of the negativity and to elevate the rates of vibration to be able to handle this age that is coming, which is really, you in tune, you would see it's a lighter rate of vibrations, but speed it up. So the so-called vegan and vegetarian and all that is not just a fad, but it is just that you have to change in order to adapt, because coming from that grosser age and energy, you have to get the body in shape to be able to handle it. This is why you could see a heavier increase too at this time of all of the insanity, mental imbalance and so on. But you have to keep certain practices going. That's why Yogi Bhajan say the mantra for this age is keep up. So what you're doing with your program, keep up and trying to enlighten people. You know what I mean?
Hey, man. Next time I'll come at you with other societal crises and ask you how you and Yogi Bhajan would. This is absolutely vital for younger people, because you keep up. And Val Serrant, what an honor, man. Thank you for making time, and I'll get a copy of this out to you later on today, man.
It's no problem, and let me leave you with this from Stalin. So that's the Stalin Steel Orchestra, 1971.
There it is.
Yeah, so I played there. That's the record. That's one of the bands I played with. So that's 1971. So thank you so much, and keep up the wonderful work you're doing.
Thank you, my friend. Make sure you let people know on Facebook that I'm doing important work too, okay?
No problem. Yeah, well, just put it on my page. No problem, okay?
Hey, much love, Val. Talk to you soon.
Okay, then.
Bye-bye. Hour number 2 rolling along here. Val Serrant, legendary percussionist from Trinidad, dropping knowledge, and we'll be back with man from New Orleans, J.D. Hill, right after this.